What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most controversial topics when it comes to mechanical keyboards, and that is the age-old question, are optical keyboards better than mechanical keyboards? Now, whether you're a keyboard enthusiast or a hardcore gamer, you've probably seen the marketing terms of optical switches are faster and mechanical switches are for losers. And as far as optical switches go, they do actuate a lot faster and they have a shorter reset point as it's basically instant. And if you're a hardcore gamer, that might be attractive to you, but does it come without cons? Is it okay? How does a keyboard work? In order to help us find out if an optical keyboard really is worth it or not, I've actually enlisted the help of a keyboard. Get it? Because it just says keyboard. Yeah, whatever. And not just any keyboard, this keyboard. Now, this big old hunk of plastic right here is the epomaker SK96S, not the GK96, as that one features an aluminum frame as well as hot swappable mechanical switches, whereas this SK96 features optical switches. Now, they are hot swappable, but they're only hot swappable to other optical switches. And right now, to my knowledge, only Gateron as well as Keychron makes optical switches that would fit this PCB. Now, this isn't a review of the SK96, even though it's a really good keyboard. This is more of just a general review of optical switch keyboards in general, because while optical switches might actuate faster than mechanical switches, how is the everyday, daily use of them? Do they sound good? Do they feel good? What's the longevity? Am I finally going to get a girlfriend? I mean, these are all very important questions when you're trying to build a keyboard, and rightfully so. Now, also helping us out when it comes to a comparison, I've got my handy dandy RK68 here, which if you remember my last review, in its stock form, it was but after I swapped out the switches and I threw on these lovely PBT keycaps, this thing's actually pretty stellar. Now, these feature hot swappable mechanical switches, aka Trusty Rusty, while the SK96 features optical switches. And to be honest, off the rip, they look pretty much the same when it comes to the actual switch design. The switch themselves from the top looks almost identical to any other mechanical switch that you would see, but the biggest difference is when you flip it over on the bottom, you'll notice that the optical switch has just one single stem that goes right into the PCB, whereas a mechanical switch has either 3 or 5 pins that you have to line up into the PCB. Now, this is kind of cool because if you did just want to swap them out real quick, you don't really have to line anything up. You just kind of pop it in, pop it in, pop it in. And I will say the removal of optical switches is way easier than mechanical switches, as they just pop right out. However, that comes with the caveat of only being able to switch it within like maybe 20 or less different switches. Because like I mentioned earlier, only Gateron and Keychron make optical switches at this point. And I know Razer makes them. I think a couple of the other bigger brands also have optical switches. However, all of those types of switches are not hot swappable. Those are in-house patented technology. And most of the time they're soldered to the PCB, so you can't even take them out. But taking a look at both of these keyboards, other than the switch designs themselves, you're not really going to know a difference until you actually start typing on them. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a teaser. Obviously, we'll do the full sound test at the end, but just bear with me for a second. So in this RK68 keyboard, I have the Acco Matcha Green switches, which are a linear switch. They're pretty heavy, but just listen. Okay, now bear with me. Now on the SK96, these are the Gateron optical brown switches, which are an optical switch that are tactile, but just listen to the difference. And yeah, that's the tactile option. I don't even want to know what the clicky option sounds like, but you get the point. It's loud. Now, I know you're saying, Cole, you have a linear switch versus a tactile switch. The linear switch is going to be so much quieter. And while you're not wrong, on the RK68, it actually came standard with just Royal Kludge branded tactile brown switches, and they were nowhere near as loud as these Gateron optical browns. Because in my eyes, the optical switches are kind of like the fake it till you make it mechanical switches, meaning, yeah, they have a stem and a spring, but they're actuated by light, not the actual switch of the mechanism. So are they real? Do they suck? I don't really know. But in my opinion, it really comes down to what do you want your keyboard for? Now, if you're a hardcore gamer and you want the fastest actuation and you want to absolutely destroy those nerds playing League of Legends, then honestly, I kind of think an optical keyboard might do you some justice, because these actuations are short, they're instant, and they are technically faster than mechanical switches. But if you're just an average Joe who enjoys gaming, and you also use your computer for, other adult things like working, making money, that sort of vibe, then you're probably better off with just a standard mechanical keyboard. Because again, with a hot swappable mechanical keyboard, the options and different things that you can do with it are pretty much endless. Whereas, like I said, with an optical keyboard, you're pretty much limited to like 20 or less switches from 2 different manufacturers. And that kind of sucks. Now, typing experience is also another area where optical keyboards, in my opinion, kind of fall short. Because again, they're not an actual mechanical switch, they're operated off of light. So it kind of reminds me of those Razer Mecha Tactile switches. It's a membrane switch trying to be a mechanical switch, but it's blatantly obvious that they're a phony. That's kind of how these optical switches are. Now, I'd be curious to try like an optical linear switch, see if that has any sort of a difference, but a basic search on the internet proves that it's probably not going to be the case. Because most of these optical switches have a very shallow bottom out and they don't have a great feel when it comes to typing. Now, this is by no means me pooing on the SK96 from epomaker, as this keyboard in general is pretty darn solid. The case design on this thing is well built. I love the angles. I love that it has a left side USB-C cable, and it is wireless compatible, so you can use it with whatever device you want. But overall, pretty good build quality. It has decent dampening, pre-lubed stabilizers, and while I'm not a fan of the GSA profile keycaps, they kind of do their job, and they are PBT. But my biggest gripe with an optical keyboard like this is that these switches are, You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Now, to kind of show you what I'm talking about, let's do the sound test on this SK96. So as you saw from the sound test, this board is very loud. I actually do think that the dampening on the underside could be improved if you wanted to mod this thing. However, that's only going to fix a little bit of the hollowness in the case. And while it will help improve the sound, it's not really going to fix these switches. And as you saw, I did lube one of the switches on the G key to see if that made that much of a difference. And while it did improve the audio a little bit, it pretty much turned it into sort of like a linear switch, because it removed any sort of tactile resistance that you would expect from a tactile switch, as these optical switches don't really have too much resistance to begin with. So after lubing them, it pretty much just became a kind of buttery smooth linear switch, which I actually personally really liked. And if you enjoy that kind of smooth creaminess, but you want the fast actuation of an optical keyboard, then definitely get this keyboard or any kind of optical keyboard, but lube those switches and you might like it better. Because after testing, this thing sounds like a blue clicky mechanical keyboard, and it is quite loud, and it bottoms out rather quickly. And the biggest problem with this is that you can't just go and grab some switches that you got lying around and throw them in, because you can only swap in optical switches. I love the epomaker SK96, but me personally, I'd get the GK96 variant so that I could have the hot swappable mechanical switches, and then this keyboard would be mwah. But as it stands with these optical switches, it's gonna be a no for me, dog. Optical switches are not my cup of tea. I'm gonna stick to the mechanical side of things. But like I said, if you're a hardcore gamer, you want that fastest actuation humanly possible, just kind of know that you are pretty much locked into whatever switch you get with it, and you might have a dozen or so different options that you might be able to switch into it, but that's about it. But that's gonna do it for today's video, guys. If you like this video, drop me one of these. I'd really appreciate it. And let me know down in the comments below whether you're team optical or team mechanical. And if you liked this video and all of the other content that I've been putting out lately, make sure and hit that subscribe button. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, I don't even, what are you doing? Thanks for tuning in, guys. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, peace.